All right, we are now recording. So welcome everyone to the September 4th, 2018 edition of the MicroProfile live Hangout. Applause. Based on feedback, I am going to be, I think, a little bit more strict with our time utilization in terms of status updates and all of that. And near the end of the call, if if we have time, then we'll take some of the more free-flowing topics. And the idea here is we want to keep this meeting within an hour and tackle almost all the topics. So if we can't seem to do that, then we may have to figure out, do we have off-week meetings and so on. All right, so the meeting minutes are pasted in the chat. It is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes. Please add yourself as an attendee if you haven't done so already. All right, so there's the introduction. So Jennifer, I will let you introduce yourself. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Moore, and I am taking actually Angela Warner's place. If anybody had been working with her, she and Jason Good used to be the marketing team for WebSphere here at IBM, and moving forward, they will have moved to new positions, and now Cami Pearman and myself are the team for WebSphere. So we're handling everything that has to do with WebSphere, including the MicroProfile activities and marketing plans. So very nice to meet everyone. And I am based here in North Carolina. I'm in the Research Triangle Park office. It's actually officially in Durham, North Carolina. And it's nice to meet everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome and condolences.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
yeah, definitely look forward to working with you as we kind of expand the reach of MicroProfile. So
yes.
I see folks have been adding their names to the attendee list. We're a little light today. I know there's PTOs going on. So, all right, so let's tackle the MicroProfile roadmap. So 2.1, I haven't actually created the release yet under the Eclipse Foundation rules, but I will be doing so probably within a week. So I'll try and get confirmation from everyone before I do that sometime over the next week. But before we do that, config 1.4, what's the status on that?
So I think it's same as last week. Mark and I did meet this week, and we have some actions to follow. I think, so next week probably will be no better.
No, well, I'm right in the middle of merging back the dynamic changes. So I already have a few commits on my private GitHub account, but it's not yet ready to ship a pull request. But I hope to get this done in the next 2 days.
Yeah.
Trying to work on this full time. No, not quite full time, but full spare time.
Yeah, then we will look at the pull request and take it from there. Okay. Thank you.
Alrighty, sorry, I was just trying to figure out the share screen options here so I could share the notes. All right, so I apologize. While you were giving a status update, I was trying to figure out how to share my screen. So I heard you say not much change quite yet, but things are still looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Okay.
we have the content pretty much ready because we already discussed all those topics over in config.jsr, and now we are just backporting this. But that's a hell lot of work because MicroProfile moved forward in the wording also a bit. So figuring out small changes, but it's pretty much straightforward.
Okay. Anyone from Reactive Streams on the call?
I'm involved in the reactive stream operators. Actually, it's we had a call this week, and we are talking about generalized bootstrapping. I think is again, this spec is I think it can be released. However, it's kind of I'm reluctant to include it into the umbrella release. I think we should continue the discussion on this, right?
Okay.
Because messaging at the moment, and now we are looking at how to use this spec. And actually, we spend a full hour this week to talk about how to use it from the messaging spec.
Okay. So yeah, let's cover that in the in the Google groups. Last week current status is last week we voted to include it. Then there was discussions on the thread about perhaps we shouldn't, because by itself it doesn't do a whole lot. And the pro for including it is the marketing value to the developers who are really into reactive. Basically finding interest in MicroProfile perhaps as a way to do some kind of reactive spec work. So all right. So let's have that discussion on the thread. Open tracing. Anyone from Open Tracing on the call? All right, I will get a status update from Pavel on that. I think we're still okay with that one. Based on prior calls, I'm going to move on to 2.2 unless anyone has anything else on 2.1. So let me do this here. I'm going to add an action item here to myself. Hold on. There we go. Oh, I'm logged in as anonymous. Okay. All right. This is from Pavel. All right. I'll just assign that as an AI to me, so I will do that. Did it work or not work? Okay. There we go. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was gonna work or not. Okay, so I now have a status assigned. Okay. 2.2. Does anyone with any of the candidate specs for 2.2? Does this look appropriate? Is there any additions, changes, or removals?
I think the fault tolerance 1.2 looks good for 2.2. 2.2, remind me again, that's at the end of this year, right? December release.
I put in date TBD. I think we have to discuss that, especially Jennifer, right? From a marketing perspective, if we do something in, if we announce in December, last year we squeezed a release into December, and there were some complaints around that from a marketing perspective because, if you chopped down a tree in the forest, is anyone there? Will it be heard, right? If there's no one around, so.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't announce then. It just means we would probably just wait until February when we have our big think event to do something.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you can't announce it. It just means the marketing, what would go in market, would get a lot more voice around something that's already happening, like a think event. And certainly not in December.
So let's this sounds like a good discussion. I think it's a combination of technical and marketing, right? We're not going to do anything before December. So if we could, if the marketing folks on their next marketing call maybe want to bring this up in terms of release timing, and then kind of come back and report to the next meeting here, that would be awesome.
Last year, sorry, John. Last year we did a January release, right? So December eventually pushed to January.
Well,
and etc.
Yeah, it was still kind of like January 4th or something, right? It was like really early, and we still kind of called it a December release because we were really intent on delivering trying to get to this quarterly cadence. I think now that we have a rich set of functionality, we don't have to be quite as what's the right word? Quite as strict around trying to reach any specific cadence. We've always kind of said between 2 and 4 releases a year was a target, and early on we've been doing quarterly releases. So, let's just kind of try and stay somewhere between the 2 to 4 releases per year.
Yeah, I think target for December, and then at least the individual spec can be released, and then umbrella spec maybe can run into beginning of the January, and then marketing team can still go ahead to announce it in the MicroProfile community.
Okay, and there's a related topic here that we should discuss. I think I still have it down here. It's under backlog. Okay. If we get to it, it's this one here, basically. How do we graduate a spec to the MicroProfile platform? Right. That's a Google group discussion, but let's tackle that if we have time.
Mm.
Okay. So it sounds like there's no change here, unless the reactive operator stream spec moves out of 2.1 and into 2.2. So let's have that discussion in the Google group. All right. I figured we haven't really heard, well, we have from the reactive group, but status updates around some of the other kind of groups that are working on, either doing R&D or working on specs. So the reactive group, I think we're pretty good with status. The service mesh group, Emily, I don't know if you had any thought about an update there.
Yeah, so service mesh, we are making really good progress with the sample apps, and we had really good discussions. And this week we will change it to the new time, meeting time, which is tomorrow, 1 to 2 p.m. in the UK time. So the calendar has the details. We have a really good discussions in the service mesh.
Okay, yeah, I plan on joining that. It's 5 a.m. my time, but
oh gosh, okay.
I'm normally up at starting meetings at 6, so I'll start an hour early and try and attend that call. There's some I want to get caught up a little bit, and there's some things around roles and responsibilities of users within the mesh, right, and how it impacts MicroProfile spec. So there's some things there I was curious about. All right.
Okay.
Long-running actions group. Anyone from long-running actions?
I'm busy actually. This week I also joined the long-running actions, and we spend a long time to discuss the essential design around the coordinator. Basically, is the one of the implementation is the use of coordinator. So we discuss whether it's kind of good design or not. So these are still issues to be ironed out.
Okay, so it still looks like we have some runway before this actually gets proposed as a spec.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Marketing update. So Jennifer, I know you're relatively new here to the group, and you're the marketing person. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there anyone else on here? 1, 2, 3.
I can give an update on the MPIO, MicroProfile IO.
Who's that?
Richard.
Oh, hey, Richard.
Yeah,
okay.
I was just talking to Ryan this morning about where he's at on that. If you want me to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so all the technical stuff is done with the moving the MPIO over to WordPress. Right now he's working on styling and those kind of issues. And so the hard part's done. It's just a matter of getting some design details. He expects to actually launch Thursday this week. And that's all I know.
Yeah, when it's released, were they looking for any other reviewers or people to give feedback or try things out before he launches?
You know, I don't know. I can ping him on that. Does anybody here want to review the site before it goes live?
It would be nice to have like demo or something so that.
Well, for me, it's more like link checking, right? Stuff like that. I mean, Ryan's been really great in terms of making sure, on the technical aspect. But if we want to go through and just double check things, like I said, links and stuff like that, and that's kind of what I was referring to more than anything. But if others think that we need something more broad than that, then you could propose, I guess.
Well, in the absence of any proposal to that effect, I will let Ryan know that people on this meeting would like to see a preview to, look over for, make sure links are correct and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if he feels he needs it, right? That's all. Just kind of offering up the, at least from my perspective, offering up the resources to do that if he thinks he needs it.
Okay, then I will make it an offer.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to have kind of a required checkpoint before he releases?
I think it should be fine.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Just with the full content over. If something not working, you can log an issue, get it fixed.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess the only other request I have of Ryan is just to post a link to the Google group when it's up, so we can all give a cheer of support and go try it out. So awesome. Okay, Thursday, Ryan to send. I'll add. Actually, I need to move a window out of the way. Ryan to send email to Google group when released. And I'm going to add, do you have Ryan's email off the top of your head? Yeah. I was going to add him an action item here. Nope. Okay. All right. The next topic Ken Finnegan brought up, the status of the MicroProfile sample in conference repos. So they're getting out of date. They haven't. Sorry, there's some people moving something around. That might be you, Emily. If you can go on mute.
I'm mute. Mute myself.
All right, so I haven't actually checked the status of the samples in the conference repo, but the feeling there is that they're getting out of date as the specs progress, and also we've added some specs, and I don't think all the specs are covered within the conference application, right, which was kind of our canonical demonstration of MicroProfile technologies. So what Ken brought up was, hey, do we want to keep this stuff current and use it as a showcase, or do we just want to archive it because there's higher priority items for everyone to work on? So that's kind of what he wanted to bring up, and I guess I'll open the floor to comments on this.
I think we should update them regularly.
Okay, Emily. So should this be as formal as a checklist item before we go into a release? Or should it be, something that we can do after release?
I think in order not to stop the release and etc., I think it should be hand in hand with the release, but can go after the release. But it's not. ignore it.
Pre-release checklist item. Is that a consensus to the folks on the phone in the meeting? That's not a trick question. I'm not trying to sway decisions either way. I just asked the question.
Sure.
Okay.
I just wanted to say I did put Ryan's email in the chat. Your changes reflected in my document, so for whatever reason.
Okay. Oh, it's not. Okay. Is that we should keep current, but can occur after release. All right. There we go. Okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna have Ken. Maybe I'm gonna leave this for next week. I'm gonna leave this item on here to see what Ken thinks about this. He's actually in the car traveling somewhere, so he wasn't able to join. But I am still a little bit curious about, everyone says yes, we should, but what does that mean, right? At some point, we should have a separate thread discussion and begin kind of like assigning action items to actually make this happen.
Yeah,
actually,
I think I agreed. Should I have an action?
Existing thread in group on defining scope and assigning action items. So I will also do this. Assign to me, assign. There we go. Okay. Next, getting started with MicroProfile thread. So this one I added. Bruno Borges from Microsoft was asking, hey, is there a getting started with MicroProfile, guide, right? And I kind of think that this is something that's missing that we have. We have a guide that just defines here's what's in MicroProfile specs, and I think that's mostly auto-generated. But then we don't really have a here's how you get started, right? Here's how you evaluate it. And now that we have the starter, what's it actually called? The starter service that the other Ryan started, or no, Rudy, that Rudy started. Perhaps we should actually think about having a getting started with MicroProfile guide. And this, to me, sounds like a marketing thing, actually. But it's easy for me to say, yeah, somebody else, go ahead and do this, which I don't intend to do. But I really like the idea of having a getting started with MicroProfile guide that kind of just gets people up to, a hello world status with a few of the specs or something. I don't know. I thought I'd throw this out there and get feedback.
I think it's a great idea. I think what we are lacking now is that we have a lot of the different pieces. I think we need to have an end-to-end scenario, basically how to get started from zero.
I totally agree with you, Emily. Jennifer from marketing. As people get closer to purchase, they really want to see something like that, a how-to guide, before they start to use it. Before they commit, they want to see something with a lot of information.
Is this related to the white paper, or is this a different document?
This is different. The white paper is executive level. I see this. So Jennifer, I'm going to switch this up a little bit. Where I saw this guide really, because we've got multiple vendors on this call, I think each of us kind of have maybe collateral around making decisions for actual purchase. The way I look at this is actually, I'm a developer. I'm interested in microservices, and I want to try this MicroProfile thing out. So
I just have an idea for how to build up a sample. We could use Git tags. So we have a tag step 1, or Git branches even. Step 1, and then describes basic setup. Step 2, adding MicroProfile config. Step 3, and then doing branches for them. And so you can kind of switch through the branches, and the application grows, and you can follow it.
That's kind of how yeah. So whether it's kind of handheld led or whatever, we can have that conversation. I first just kind of wanted to establish that this would be a really good thing for us to do, to build awareness and give people a little bit of a hands-on, getting started experience with MicroProfile.
I think there are two different levels of course grain, two different levels of people or target audience. The one is managers who want to say, oh, is this something we want to force people in our company to use? And the second one is technics who want to try it out. And for them, having samples running in code is the best, because they check it out, they have the code, they can debug through, see how it feels, see how it looks like, and then let it run.
Don't you have to have an implementation to make that work? Like, wouldn't you have to say?
You can switch with profiles, so we can have multiple of them, and we can just add the profiles to all those branches and then be done.
So Rudy created the starter app, right? That basically does what start.spring.io does for MicroProfile. And you can select an implementation. It randomizes the implementation by default, right? But if you want, you can override and pick an implementation. Then with the guide, assuming that we have portability, right, which is part of the goal, assuming that we have portability, it should work across all implementations, especially assuming if the first step is to begin with the starter app online.
Yeah, I think is for this one. First of all, this is really good. I think it's need to be practical. So basically, it's the watermark suggests basically at the end of this cannot get started. You will have your app developed. But I also think this needs to start from what Rudy is a starter. So basically, step 1, you can use that one to create your app, and link it to some more detailed MicroProfile docs to explain each individual, like specs and etc. Understand it.
Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to send myself an action item. Start.
Could you put in chat the person who's doing that code that randomizes the Tommy EE 7 point whatever is going to be released this week, and it has MP support.
Sure. Getting start thread. Actually, if someone could paste Rudy's, while I take a note here, someone could paste Rudy's email address in. You can get that from the Google group or from your inbox.
Okay, I will try to do that.
Thank you. So I'm going to send this to myself. Guide. And by the way, I see this again as a developer thing, but if the marketing folks think that we'll get more mileage off of something different, that's a conversation that we can have. I'm cool with that. So when I create this conversation, though, let me think about this. What do I create this conversation? Do I create it in the marketing group, or do I create it in the main Google group? Maybe I'll create it in the marketing group. Google group?
I think we have to target both audience, but on a different level. So we need high level kind of folders, plus the Git repo or some code, which one can go through.
Sorry. So you think there should be?
We should have the low level stuff where people can really look at it technically. But plus, we also need, we have. Usually in companies, it's not the technicians who decide the technology, sadly, but there is also a lot of people involved to make decisions. And those can't read code most of the times. So they need some addition. I mean, Emily, the IBM folks, and also Reddit knows this best. So you talk to some managers who wants to have some big vendor with some backing, and they need some kind of high gloss paper.
All right.
You got me.
Yeah. Let's have this conversation in the Google group. I think I'll do this in the main Google group. In fact, what I'll do is continue thread. Actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to continue the thread that Bruno started. To continue thread that Bruno started. Okay. And guide target audience. Okay. I will do that. Okay. I threw this out. I've been thinking a little bit more and more about the switch from. Okay, sorry, I'm switching items here now. The impact of the JDK and MicroProfile specs. So MicroProfile relies on some some Java EE8 related specs, right? JAX-RS and CDI and so on. But one of the questions I've been asking myself is, at what point do we want to begin thinking of supporting JDK 11?
So could I comment on that? Because I'm on the steering and the specification committee for Jakarta.
Absolutely.
We were just talking about that today, and we're going to, Jakarta EE8 is going to baseline a minimum of Java SDK 8. So we're not going to be making 11 a minimum or anything like that. Hopefully, it should support later things. But if you make MicroProfile based on JDK 11, it won't work with Jakarta EE. Not that there's much there yet, but just a warning.
Okay. Yeah. Someone brought up this topic on the Jakarta EE call. I can't remember who it was. That was me.
Who has Java 11 or anything beyond Java 8 running in production?
Well, no one yet. And I'm not advocating that we do this for, MP2.1 or MP2.2, right? But I suspect with the release of JDK 11 and the more rapid releases of the JDKs, it's something that we're just going to have to figure out. And I think to Richard's point, Richard is, I think, is basically saying, well, we got to make sure that we don't break compatibility with the Jakarta specs, right? I think that's true, but yeah. Part of the problem I have is that Jakarta is moving very slowly, right? Jakarta EE isn't moving as quickly as I'd like, but I'm not trying to rush this, but I do kind of want to begin having this conversation and kind of force the discussion both in Jakarta EE and here, just to begin defining what the status is. To begin defining what a roadmap plan is. Because even back when I was doing Java EE work at Oracle, it was a topic that I had brought up, right, about how do we stay current with the JDKs. And now we have a JDK that's going to evolve even more quickly than it did back in 2014. So this is just a topic I wanted to bring up, I guess.
Well, I was just thinking that you have different versions of the MicroProfile umbrella spec. I think there's an umbrella spec. And, Jakarta can settle on an older set of specifications that support Jakarta EA, which wouldn't inhibit you from moving forward with later versions. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we discussed this in the reactive worker group this week or last week regarding this GTK 11. GTK 11 will be out, I think it's in October time.
I'd say Code 1 probably, right, before Code 1 or at Code 1.
Yeah, because we do want to use some aspect of GTK 11. I think it would be good if we start saying either December or early next year. We said, okay, we'll move up to JDK 11. And for Jakarta EE8, I kind of don't think it's going to be a problem. If it's based on Jakarta EE8, or the component we brought from Jakarta EE spec, we will test against the GTK 11, and so application servers will make sure all the GSRs and etc. will work with GTK 11. I think the sooner the better. At least we can push the application server to move towards the GTK 11. Maybe we should early next year and etc. We should attempt it.
My point wasn't that Jakarta EE8 or 9 or 10 won't support JDK 11, but the Jakarta EE specification committee, the working group, everything, they're very interested in adopting the MicroProfile specifications, not being, not taking control of them, but adopting them into the Jakarta EE umbrella specification. So even though you could run JDK 11, if you want it to be part of the Jakarta EE 9, 10, whatever, it has to be in sync with or one of the versions has to be in sync with the JDK version supported by that platform.
So with other words, if reactive uses Java 11 and Jakarta E9 defines a baseline of, let's say, Java 9, then MicroProfile reactive cannot be part of Jakarta E9.
Not part of the official standard.
Yes.
Yeah.
That way around.
So basically, the more discussion we have, the better. I think is, some specs like reactive could be based on GTK 11, and then we can create MicroProfile 3.0, to host that. And then all the 2.x is based on GTK 11, not GTK 8. And then we only put some other very advanced specs in the MicroProfile 3.0. In this case, the Jakarta EE can choose which version they want to include, etc.
Yeah, and that was I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was saying earlier that you could continue to evolve it, but you have to have at least one version. That's
Yeah, great.
And someone has to make the first step, and hopefully do this.
Yeah. At this point, I'm not trying to force any kind of decisions, whether it's Jakarta or MicroProfile. I just want to have the conversation about how we're going to begin addressing this, right? Because if, we always kind of saw MicroProfile as being this innovation arm, right? Driving driving microservices into enterprise Java. And part of the interesting problem is you can innovate, but it'd be nice to innovate on some of the more innovative things in the JDK, but then as soon as it comes to the enterprise platform to adopt it, would it be able to, right? Because we're relying on a more recent JDK. But I think Richard's point is valid, right? Versions of MP or multiple MP profiles.
So probably it's only a matter of kind of wording or documentation. So if every spec has kind of or the repo has in the README kind of standardized set of prerequisites like Java 8, Java E8, and then we kind of make this standard and everybody knows, so look at this README in the repo and you know exactly this version supports or requires Java 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny.
Again, my point is including it in the specification. So let's say there's a Jakarta E9 specification and we want to have the MP specs included in that as referenced or whatever. They're going to want to reference a specific version of MP. When it runs through the TCK tests, it's going to have to run on the same, it can't be ahead of the Jakarta platform in terms of its minimum baseline JDK, or you won't even be able to run the TCKs.
Yeah, it's actually currently it's implicit knowledge kind of. I don't think we have this written down, but everybody knows. Well, MicroProfile 1.0 was based on E7, and MicroProfile 2.0 is based on Java E8 and Java 8 upwards. But do we have this written down in the specifications itself? At least for MicroProfile config, we didn't. I'm not quite sure about the others.
I think in the POM and also in the API jar, the manifest has information, if I remember correctly. If you open the API jar,
we have the Maven target, the source and target Java version in the POM. It's nowhere in the spec. It's just
if you look at API manifest.
Yeah, of course in the manifest, because Maven generates it for you. But
you mean documented
documents somewhere. It's not kind of
okay.
People will figure, but because it simply doesn't work in other versions. But we probably could also write this in the specs. I'm not quite sure about this.
I would recommend writing it in the specs only because Java EE always did that, and it was helpful.
Yeah.
So anyway, we started the discussion on the topic, which was my intent, especially with the reactive APIs coming about and some of the things that have been added to JDK 9. I haven't even looked at 10 yet, potentially 11. It might be interesting for those specs to be able to leverage. So, all right. Do I want to? I might create a thread on this in the Google group. I'll think about that. If someone else wants to, of course they can as well. All right. This leads us to a backlog. One discussion that's going on right now is the graduation of specs. Let's see. How do we want to formalize the addition of new specs? And then related, how do we then bring a spec, an individual spec, into the platform spec, right? So it's kind of a two-tiered thing. So let me put this here.
I think last time someone mentioned that we could probably introduce a milestone or a release candidate step where a spec first needs to at least produce one candidate release. And then if it's getting used and we get feedback, then we say, oh, it's ready for prime time, and we propagate and do a 1.0 release. Something like that.
And what I think it's it doesn't even have to be a candidate release, it could be a formal release, and it just resides standalone and we could measure interest and adoption on that before it's actually pulled subsequently into the platform release?
Well, the point with, or the argument for a candidate release would be that it's official that that probably the API gets broken and in a backward incompatible way, because you figure it's not that perfect, you need something else, and then you can go back. It's much harder if from the people, from the kind of expectations from the people, it's much harder if you have a 1.0 and then you say, oh, but the 1.1 is not backward compatible. It's not that nice. So it's better you have a CR1, and then people expect that from the candidate release to the final 1.0, you might break backward compatibility with this feedback you get.
I think there's two things. I think for release candidate is people see this release candidate, they may not want to try it. So, oh, I'm waiting for the final release.
This is always the trade-off.
I think it's for the 1.0 release, if you have a backward incompatible changes, you should do the like a 2.0 release. If the umbrella spec doesn't include that spec, that version, I think it's a less issue to increase your major version, like from 1.0 to 2.0. I think it's I'm okay with either like a candidate release or just releases, but do not include it in the umbrella release.
Let's make it short. We have 12 minutes, so I'd say John is volunteering. You get volunteered to create a topic, and then let's have a discussion on this. Or did we already?
Well, that's what this is. So we actually already have a topic on this, and this is where Steve brought up the idea of a two-step process.
Yeah.
And then the thread continued, and this morning, Andro even added something else in, and this talks about the voting process, which I don't want to quite get into yet. What started this thread, I think, was it me or was it somebody else? Oh yeah, we chatted about it at the live Hangout, because right now we just have this awfully ad hoc process, right? And a bunch of us on the live Hangout say, hey, let's just, so-and-so worked on a spec, and let's include it. And we figured, well, we need broader community involvement in these decisions, and also the implementers of the specs, at the platform level, there has to be some level of decision making, because as soon as you add something to the MP platform level spec, which is really all we really have right now, pretty much everything that we do is implied to be in the platform level spec. That means as soon as it makes it in there, all the vendors have to implement it if they want to say we're MP whatever compatible, right? So that's what started this thread, saying, hey, we need a little bit more of a formal process around this. So right now, there's where I think this discussion is at, literally is there's a two-step process. One is something becomes an individual spec, and then it somehow, some way, and this is the second part of it, it becomes part of the platform spec, right? So the discussion on hand is it a candidate release, or is it actually a full release that occurs before it can actually become a part of the actual platform spec, right? The way it's worded now is it would become a full spec, stand on its own for some period of time, let's say a release, right, 3 months or whatever. It stands on its own. We get feedback on it. People can begin using implementations, and then maybe we add it to a platform level spec, which we haven't really defined yet. That's the other thing that we have to do, is define the platform level spec. So anyway, I don't know, thoughts about, well, we've got 9 minutes left, but this is really the last topic we have. Candidate release versus having a full-blown spec release, have it stand on its own before it's actually included in the platform release.
I would agree with the candidate release. I think that system works really well. Apache uses it and other projects and stuff like that. But the idea is that it's brought in and welcomed to the community, but it has to prove itself before it becomes part of the specifications.
Does the candidate release have to include an implementation?
Yes, because people should give feedback. So naturally, it's in practice. If you want to develop a good API, you need to also write your own implementation. Or at least there must be an implementation where you can try it, where you can try the TCK and so on. So there needs to be an implementation. And so far, it also always had been the case. So the most important feedback is to get feedback.
Right. But does that encourage people to do it though? Because that means that I have to actually implement the API.
No, not the people themselves.
May not make it to the actual platform.
Well, it doesn't matter. You have to, for developing the API, for kind of getting the API polished, getting it ready, getting it prime time and not being the ivory tower API, you have to have an implementation written down. I'm not that good in playing
No,
Java.
I'm just saying, I'm not, yeah, I get that. I'm just saying that I'm just trying to understand that the effort that we're asking people to go through for a chance to include their API into MicroProfile.
Ah, that you mean? Well,
yeah. So it's like if let's say I come up with an idea, right? So I have to.
Well, usually we say, this application server is MicroProfile compatible. Usually it's just you have a library and you stuff it into your application. All of the specifications are available standalone. You can just add them to your existing application server. You can use MicroProfile 2.0 with WebLogic if you want, because just add the libraries. And all those things are available as standalone libraries.
Actually, but before, one thing I want to make kind of clear, Richard, when we talk about candidate releases, part of the problem now is we could have a candidate, for some specs that we've done, we could have a candidate release for a week of a spec, and then it becomes production. Then it becomes final, right? We could have very short candidate release cycles with MicroProfile. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it has happened. So
okay, so I'm really thinking of entirely new specifications, not iterations on existing specifications. And my understanding that MicroProfile has always been a code-first organization, so I don't really see how the candidate releases conflicts with the specification process.
One thing, Richard.
No, that's
so
good.
The candidates, if a MicroProfile release, the candidate release, that's only for API and spec. Implementation is separate. So the thing is that what I'm worrying about, if we release like API candidate release, which application server is going to release their product to support this candidate release?
You don't have to.
If you don't have to, and nobody, the end user won't be able to use it because there's no implementation.
Sure, they just can import. If you have a web application, a WAR file, then just drop in the jar or have it as dependency, the implementation and the API, and you're done.
Where the implementation? You need to provide the implementation, right?
Yes, and of course, the people who develop the API usually also provide one or more implementations.
Yeah, one more.
We had 3. At the same time.
One more implementation, not necessarily that implementation is released. I could provide an implementation, but it's not in the product as yet.
Most of the times, it's a chicken egg problem. The projects are not released because the API is not yet released. So if you have just a snapshot API, you can't release a final implementation of it. So probably the name candidate or release is too close to release candidate, so it kind of gives you the intention that it's almost done. But probably it's better to encourage that people kind of already ship a preview release or something like that a month earlier before they are done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let me ask a question. How much longer will this new process, will it slow down things, for innovation? That's my concern.
I don't know if it will slow down necessarily. What it is intended to do is to how do I say this here? Is define the formality of the spec being included in the platform spec. So an individual spec could still be with this CR approach. Okay. With it being a standalone spec, right, as opposed to a candidate release, the idea was it could stand on its own, right? Anybody that wanted to pick it up could pick it up, but to say you're MicroProfile compatible wouldn't be an issue until that spec was actually picked up into the platform spec, right? So it would still be an implementation by implementation decision as to whether app server by app server decision as to whether or not it picked up that spec.
What about releasing a sub 1 release, 01, 02, 03, and then if you say, oh, now we're ready for prime time, you graduate to 1.0, and this is kind of the one which gets into the first MicroProfile umbrella.
I kind of like the CR a little bit better approach than that, but I don't know. I think we got to talk about this some more. I don't think we're going to finish it here on this call.
Right.
But maybe I think what I'll do is write up a Google Doc, kind of lay out some of this the way I think it's currently being defined slash. I don't want to say proposed. I'll lay out a Google Doc with the options that we've discussed, and maybe what we do is we tackle this in a Google Doc. Does that sound okay? Because I want to make sure that we have at the top, like in one place, kind of a definition of what the problem statement is, and validate the problem statement, and then kind of give the options that we've discussed so far. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll write this up as a Google Doc.
It'd be helpful also to understand how it is happening now, because right now I think people, they have an idea, they start a Google thread, right? And then that way.
Correct. It becomes a sandbox project, and they just kind of collaborate with whoever else they can find that's interested. The problem is the formality of taking something from a sandbox project to a formal project has simply been very ad hoc.
So that's the missing step. Okay.
Yeah, that's a missing step. So not enough community involvement in that decision.
That process works now when everybody's pretty much in agreement about stuff, but eventually someone's going to propose a project that the other folk, not everybody agrees with, and then you're going to want some kind of staging area for that for it to prove itself.
Yeah, I mean, well, exactly. That's kind of how I saw a 1.0 standalone spec, right? We already have the sandbox for it to kind of prove interest, right, where people can kind of collaborate on a spec, and maybe even in SmallRye or somewhere else, you can kind of collaborate on an implementation. And then it could potentially be a 1.0 standalone spec that doesn't really consider itself part of the broader MicroProfile platform, right? Let people try it out. Let people decide if they want to move it forward. If it gets enough interest, then we can make it a formal part of the MicroProfile spec. I don't know if that's what you were thinking, Richard, but that was my interpretation.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's something that can probably be tackled on the list. But,
Yeah.
You have namespace concerns, too. So if it's going to be org eclipse MicroProfile blah, you're already giving them some kind of official label just by giving them the namespace.
We oddly, I think we actually do that already, right? With new spot, I think everything in the sandbox is already org.microprofile as people just kind of hash things out. But that's a separate interesting issue. All right, we've reached the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and cut the call at this point. Thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully next week we'll have most of the PTOs over with. We'll have broader attendance. But thanks everyone. See you in 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thanks.
All right.
Good job. Bye.
All right. Thanks everyone. Bye. Thanks, Jennifer.